You're listening to the Built in Barcelona podcast with Kris. Welcome back to Built in Barcelona, the podcast where we sit down with the founders, creatives, and builders shaping what's happening in this city. Today, I'm joined in person for the first time by Michael Eriksson, founder and CEO of Liminal Discovery, a company that's all about driving sustainable success through digital transformation. We're going to talk about his journey from Sweden to Barcelona, why he's betting big on AI, and how he's working with companies like Philip Morris to reinvent their business models for a more sustainable future. Let's dive in. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kris. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for being here and for being my guinea pig with the first live in-person recording. We've had some microphone issues, so hopefully this sounds okay. But let's just go for it and see how it goes.
That's all we can do, right? Iterations.
Yeah. But no, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. Obviously you're originally from Sweden. What brought you to Barcelona? It was about 20 years ago, right?
Yes, it was in 2005. Well, the journey actually started already in 2004. I was doing my master thesis and ending my studies. And I was asked to interview for a company that one of my friends worked for. And during the interview, it was explicit said that the role was to be first based in Sweden for 6 months with the ambition to transfer to Barcelona. To be honest, I had never had Barcelona on my radar as a place that I wanted to live in, but it sounded like a good opportunity. I figured, 1 or 2 years of experience working abroad is a good thing. And well, we all know what that turned out to be. So here we are more than 20 years later.
Well, it's funny actually, because you and I worked together in a previous life. Funnily enough, it was the same for me. Barcelona was not on my radar at all until I got the call from the head of recruitment in Barcelona saying that they were looking for people to join the company, actually originally in London, but I kind of found out that you guys had an office in Barcelona and really pushed for that. But yeah, before that, I really hadn't thought about Barcelona at all.
No, I remember that when you joined. Actually, I don't think I said anything at the time, but I thought for myself, you mentioned your time perspective. I said, yeah, we'll see. And here we are.
Yeah. 8 years later, still in the city. So it definitely worked.
It has some magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And you recently moved back to Sweden and then back to Barcelona. So what brought you back?
What brought me back? So many dimensions on that question, to be honest, but I never fully left, I don't think. Part is my son lives here. So obviously I had that close connection with family. But if that wasn't enough, what I realized was moving back, and I know people tell you this, they tell you that, if you stay in a place more than a year, you tend to stay 3 years and then 5 years and then 10 years. And I think somewhere around the 10-year limit is that magic thing where things change so much at the place where you come from. So the move back is actually not a move back. It's a move to a new place. And you don't really think about the small daily adjustments you make to culture. It's like eating habits, obviously very different in Sweden than they are in Spain. A question about interests, what you do and what you don't do in your spare time. How you ride the metro, how you ride the bus, how you pay for your tickets. You think things stand still where you come from because you don't notice the changes as much when you live in a place. But when you go back, and I'm not talking about that, it's like I've been back visiting, of course, in Sweden, but I've never lived there. So, interacting with the system, the government. Sweden has become one of the most digital-driven countries when it comes to interaction with government, for an example. There is a thing called Bank ID, which is basically your digital ID. Without it, you can't do anything. You can't interact with the bank. You can't interact digitally with any of the government institutions. So the fact that I didn't have one when I came back was a big problem. Those are the practical changes. But like I mentioned before, it's the small cultural things that you don't notice. And it is actually hard to readjust. That wasn't what took me back, though, I wouldn't say per se. But it's probably made me appreciate Barcelona more after I returned. What I like about Barcelona, which I think will keep pulling me back to this place, there are, of course, many other cities like this in the world, is the metropolitan feel. even if we like to say it's a Spanish city, it's a Catalan city, to me, it's a world city. Here you have people from around the world living here, working here, seeking themselves here. And I think that has a very unique value in itself, that it is a place where you have multiple cultures, multiple nationalities. It's kind of one of those few spots where you can actually meet people from around the world at terms that you're in the same place and
Yeah.
you can relate to it.
Yeah, and I definitely felt that. Like, I remember when I moved here 8 years ago, within a few days, felt very much at home. Coming from the UK, which, is a European country as well, but vastly different, really. There was just this sort of sense of it being quite comfortable, easy to get around, like the metro works really well. And even though there's a bit of a language difference, of course, and I think that was even more present 8 years ago than it is today, immediately felt very comfortable. And I think that's what a lot of people that come here from abroad feel when they get here. And it's just a very easy place to meet people from not just locally, but also, as you said, from all over the world. I think when we worked together, we had 50 nationalities in the team or something ridiculous. It was a really, really broad spectrum of people from all over the world, which was amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, we work together in a very unique office in that sense. I think that we had that landscape of multiple nationalities, and I think it helped us all. Because, first of all, we all created a version of reality from the day to day we lived, but then we also shared perspectives from different places that kind of enriched that part, and we could learn why people in different countries saw things different ways. And I think that learning experience and meeting it has a great value. It was actually one of the things that I noticed back in Stockholm, which I was, I felt a little bit sad about in a way. I really like Stockholm. Stockholm is a very beautiful city, by the way. It's one of my top favorite cities. So it was not me leaving Stockholm as much as maybe moving back to Barcelona, feeling good about moving back to Barcelona. But one thing that I did feel was a loss in Stockholm was the lack of global collaborationship. And I don't mean in political terms or things like that. I just meant that when I met customers or potential customers and presenting the work that we do and the location, we're spread out. I don't like to define Liminal Discovery as a Barcelona Spanish company or Portuguese company or whatnot, because one thing I've learned is that the business of digital is global. It doesn't have borders. We try to border it, we try to limit it, but whatever we do, the very essence of digital is that it's open and free in a way. Meeting with senior stakeholders in Stockholm, I felt that you almost needed to be present not only in Sweden but in Stockholm, the city in itself, and that I felt sad about it. But I wanted to ask you something in that also, because London, to me, working there, has always struck me as kind of like New York. If you want to get things done in a fairly fast way, it's the place to be, because people are there focused on their job, they're focused on their career, the money is there, the decision makers are there, and everything moves quite fast. But Barcelona, I feel, is more of a city to live. Here you have the work is part of your life, but it's not your life. How was that kind of move, that transition for you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think when I lived in London, so I was in London for about 5 years before moving here, and you really do feel like you're in the center of the world in London. It feels like it's one of the cities where everything happens first. As you rightly said, it's kind of London and New York, like these major cities where you really feel like you're some of the first people to experience new services or a new way of doing things. And I still see that. With the amount I see London change, like every time I go back, it feels like they've completely renovated a part of the city. They've built like these incredible new spaces, which they seem to just do in like a matter of years. Whereas when I moved to Barcelona, everything was much slower. And it was like, okay, there are areas of the city which have needed a bit of renovation for a while, and they're still kind of in the same spot as they were. And you don't have that same quickness as I was experiencing in London. But lifestyle wise, I think if you are able to find a good job here, I think that work-life balance is so much better. One thing I really found when I lived in London was every 4 or 5 weeks, I really felt the need that I needed to leave the city. I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to go and see some green. I need to get to the countryside or what have you. And it really struck me in Barcelona that I wasn't having that feeling. It's maybe a little bit more now that I've been here for so long, and some of the things like the city beaches don't call me as much as they did when I first moved here, and I prefer to get out of the city a little bit more than I did at the beginning. But when I first moved here, having the Coicerola at the back on your doorstep, having the beach, having just this way more relaxed pace of life where you take a longer lunch, for example, and you're not kind of tied to your desk all the time. It just meant that I could be in the city for months without having that burning desire to need to get out. And that's when I realized that I was living somewhere quite special.
I think that's, if we look at how Barcelona is built, the architecture, it's with intent. The city is built for, living and working in the same place. I remember when I started to learn about Gaudi's architecture and the way that the city was built, the open spaces, the mega blocks, the part about having parts of the city for your life with family and then having your life for work, that it is kind of, and I think that brings a lot of uniqueness to Barcelona. Tourists who come here, I always like to point out for the people the first time they come why the city feels so bright, even if it's a big city. And especially Champlain with the cut-off corners, just making every intersection so much more open for light, and what change that does.
It's the longest place I've ever lived anywhere. So I think that shows that it's a pretty special spot. You've obviously mentioned Stockholm a few times. How do you view the difference between the business culture in Sweden or Stockholm and here?
Yeah, that's a hard one to answer. First of all, I've never started a business in Stockholm or in Sweden, so I don't know all the hoops and loops you need to go through. I'm familiar with the complexities of starting one in Barcelona. So I won't speak so much about the administration in itself, because I could honestly not say which one has pros and cons of that. I think in Stockholm, if you are operating within a domain or within a speciality or something that you can find the resources in Sweden, I think Stockholm is a very good place to get young people that are prepared to get onto a new project and so on. So there is a very high level of educated persons within, maybe forward-leaning digital technologies. There is a reason why we have so many, global hits like Spotify, Klarna, Minecraft for those who play games. A lot of these companies or the ideas started in Stockholm and the area around there. And that's not a coincidence, I don't think. In Barcelona, I think you have the city doing a lot of work for you. If you want to recruit people from different places, you don't need to sell them to it that much. It's not so hard to sell it. And I think you have a very good and strong group of educated people who are eager to engage in opportunities. So I think in the sense being a startup in Barcelona, and if you have proven that you can move, you will find a lot of passionate young people that wants to join and will work hard for it and share the vision and so on. A lot of smart people and really good at what they're doing. The only barrier I've experienced here is unfortunately that the language is a factor in not as much as maybe when I came here 20 years ago, but I remembered when we did recruit back then that the level of English, if you want to operate internationally, if you have, let's say, London as a market, or if you have the US as a market, or even Netherlands, Switzerland, if you have those as markets, you do need to have a certain level of language, how should we say, capabilities, or you need to carry a conversation with a certain flow to be accepted and respected by the clients. That's probably the only thing I would put as, a downside in Barcelona when it comes to building and recruiting.
I think that the level of English has improved noticeably in the time that I've been here. I remember when I first moved to the city, only in the very heart of the tourist spots could you find like people working in the service industry that could speak English. And then outside of that, it was very much Spanish or in many cases Catalan as well. And I think that's really changed now. I really feel like even going to other parts of Catalonia, there's quite a lot of people that speak English, and particularly with our generation, of professionals seem to have a much better level of English than their parents would have done, for example. So I think that is definitely changing, but the difference, I think, with other countries and sort of levels of English, if you compare it to the Nordics, for example, or Germany, in those countries they don't dub the English TV shows or movies, and here in Spain they do. And I think that is amazing when you meet people that speak amazing English that are from other countries. You're like, wow, how did you learn English, like such great English? They say like The Simpsons. Yeah, just
It's the easiest low effort fix there is to basically educate an entire population, just to stop doing the dubbing. But in all fairness, now we're talking from a strictly professional perspective and how English is the dominant language of business. And then we have what is our responsibility for being the people coming here. And it's sometimes easy to forget that. I forgot about that when I came here. And I think I acted a little bit like a brat, to be honest, not very nice, expecting that the world should speak English because I spoke English or I was accustomed to it. The language is such an important part if you truly want to be part of the society also. And I ignored that in the beginning.
And yeah, I completely agree. I think so. My wife is from here, and before meeting her, I did Spanish classes. I did try, but I would very easily get demotivated, and I would maybe do 2 months where I'd do classes and I'd try, and then something else would come along, and I would kind of drop it. And then I met my wife, and suddenly was in these kind of social environments with her friends or family where everyone was speaking Spanish. I then really put a lot of effort into learning the language, and it completely changed my experience. And now I've seen, with the small amount of Catalan that I can speak, I mean, I can literally say a few words, the way that people light up when you say a few words in Catalan, it is so endearing. It really makes me want to learn Catalan, because the level of appreciation that people have for you is wonderful. And so yeah, I think learning the language, or at least showing that you want to learn, I think goes a long way here. But let's move on now. Let's start talking about your latest venture, Liminal Discovery. So you started that back in 2020. What was the initial vision behind the company?
There's so many layers on that question. It started actually, I started with the embryo of the idea when you and I worked together. As you know, at Dima, we worked with these large digital transformation projects for large enterprises. And I remember we had one client, and first time I spoke to their C-level executive team, I found that we hit a good tone about where they wanted to go. They had $50 million that they were going to put behind it over a 3-year plan to execute this digital transformational program to bring them to a new future. So they had the money, they had the vision and the strategy, and they had a new executive team that was fully recruited and on board with it. I was super hyped because working all these years and seeing how many of these projects never get to where you want it to be or to get delivered on the promise. I mean, McKinsey and the other ones normally refer to it as somewhere between 75 to 85% of digital transformational projects fail. It's a pretty brutal number when you think about it. Nevertheless, I figured, this is our shot at doing something on a huge scale that's going to be a significant difference. And cutting the whole story short, 1 year later, it was cut. The whole project was sliced, and now after that, the business was stitched in pieces and sold off. And the reason for that was they were not able to move along the vision and the strategy. The organization kept being stuck in old patterns. They kept operating the way they always did. So any transformation that doesn't bring the people in the organization with it is nothing. You can't do anything if you just try to apply technology. So that made me think about, what is it that is not working here? So that's what I started to have in mind, that I want to start a business focusing on purpose-led transformation. So it's in the name also. So liminal comes from the word liminality, which is the period in a transition where you stop being what you used to be, but you have not yet become what you will be. And you're operating in the unknown space in between, which, going through the teenage years in a way. You're not a kid, but you're not a grown-up. And you're trying to navigate that space between. That can be pretty painful for most people. On the one hand side, you are what you were, you are what you're going to be, but you're not really any of it. So you have that sensation. You have a sensation of unclarity or uncertainty. And you have a chance to discover who you're going to be, where the word discovery comes in. So liminal discovery is about transformation and discovering what that new version of you would be, or in this case, what the new version of the business will be. So we're actually, the purpose of liminal discovery is to help our clients to transform with purpose. Now comes the kicker on, you mentioned sustainability and sustainable growth. First of all, it's all about changing how you look upon your business. Digital is really about reimagining your business in a perspective and a lens of how technology can enable it to be something different. Sustainability is really to take the value of your business and look at how can we provide this ongoing without end. I mean, sustainability is really that it's perpetual, that there is no end of it. You drive a business in a way that you don't consume resources. I feel these two marry each other. So that's how I set out and started Liminal Discovery. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
That's how the idea came about.
Okay. So purpose-led transformation, and you mentioned sustainability there, but you're thinking of sustainability in a slightly different way. Most people, when they hear sustainability today, they think CO2 footprint, right? Or carbon footprint. But that's not what you're talking about, right?
Sustainability is today a global problem. So for an example, I love to work with the enterprise level companies, the global enterprise companies. Why? Because their influence is felt in so many areas of the world and in so many large aspects. And if we see sustainability as be CO2 only, that's where we're going to force these companies to go. But if you look at it, the perspective of what the business is doing, some of these already have a very low CO2 footprint. So minimizing that is not going to be where they're going to make the biggest effort. In the world today, we have other things like social stability. If we can create a more harmonious society general, that will lead to more long-term investment. So by elevating every level of societies, sustainable societies, that's really where I believe we need to do the biggest work in the world today, because that will enable us to do all these other things that will help us with the environmental. But if we don't bring people to feeling that they are part of a sustainable society, I'm not sure we can convince them to do the choices or take actions that will create the other parts that we needed.
Very interesting. And I mean, so you've obviously been working on this new venture since 2020. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions people might have about integrating sustainability into their business models?
First of all, people don't see the connection between the two. And that's what I feel is a bit, it's a shame, because it's a lost opportunity. And like we spoke about before, transformation is not about applying digital or, applying technology or so on. It's about shifting the way that you look upon how you deliver the value of your business. And sustainability needs that shift as well. Can we deliver on the purpose of this business in a way where we are acting sustainable? Like we're thinking about, can we deliver the purpose of this business using digital? And how does that change the way we work and operate? So I see them, so the misconception is that they are vastly separated. And I think that's a missed opportunity. That's one misconception, and I understand why, because they are not treated by the same people in the organization. Sustainability sometimes comes from a CSR perspective, corporate social responsibility, which is more, about how we are seen in the world almost. It's about the messaging. And then you have digital and IT that in the past were struggling with being kind of just a support function to what was really the business. But that means you have two silos almost of the business, and there is no natural touch point if it's not joined by the CEO or at the top executive level. So I did not factor that in when I started, how difficult it is to join these two. You will be diverted to one or another depending on how you start the conversations. So that's one misconception that people have, or that I had. Another misconception, I think, is exactly that every company needs to do the same to be sustainable. And I think that kind of stems from a lack of impact analysis. So what impact do we have on the world? You make an analysis of how much CO2 do we do. Okay, so that's one. We have an impact on how good or bad our products are for people. Okay, that's another one. But as a company or as an organization operating in this world, the countries we are in, the vendors we choose, I mean, what is our net contribution to the world, good and bad? And if you start to look at it from that side, it's not that hard to find, okay, so this is our biggest area of negative impact. How do we change that? That's where you start. If you start to do what everyone else do, how, maybe you're working in a place where you have like a teeny part, and then you have the big part over here that you just ignore because you don't even understand the impact. So we need also to stop treating every business as like they all have to do the same thing.
Okay. And can you give kind of a real world example of the type of work that you're doing for your clients then? In that vein, like is there a client that you can talk about or a project?
Yes, I mean, you mentioned it when we started. So Philip Morris, the company that is behind the most famous, well-known brand of cigarettes in the world, Marlboro, looked at what they are not doing right. The fact is they have a product that killed their customer. So it's definitely not a good product, right? And besides that, people that get reduced health, it has an impact on society, healthcare, God knows what. It's a huge problem. So when that business said, you know what, we're going to stop selling cigarettes. We're not going to do that anymore. We need to find our way out of the cigarette business. That I would actually say, then you're talking about understanding. So what is our net impact on the world? Well, our product is killing people and making them sick. We need to do better. We need to change. And you need to allow that business to do that change. They are serious about getting out of the cigarette business. And they want to move people away from the products that is hurting or killing people the most. And that I felt, well, if the bad boy in the class wants to become better, the net contribution that we do to the world is higher if I only work with Greenpeace and help them doing something. So, by only working with the best in class and you refuse the worst in class, your net impact on the overall progress of the class is not going to be as great. So I see that as part of it. So, and that is contributing to the sustainability of our societies because it reduces the economic cost for healthcare. It makes people being able to live longer, healthier, and many aspects with it. So that's one part.
And so Philip Morris then in wanting to move away from cigarettes, they're moving more towards electronic products, are they, like IQOS and those types of things? Is that what they're aiming to do?
That's their replacement for cigarettes. They're moving to these connected devices, but as a business, that's not easy for them. So they are moving from selling essentially what is dried grass rolled up in small sticks, and then you put them in a paper box, square, so they go very nice in a box, and you can ship them for low cost, and you can sell them over the counter wherever. That's a business idea. Not much digital about that, and there is no feedback from it. Once it's consumed, it's gone. And now all of a sudden they're going to build, or they are building, and they're selling electronic devices that by essence is there to serve the user or the customer every day. And in today's world, 10 years back, you could probably sell an electronic device and nobody would ask about the connectivity in it. But today, if you're buying something, you almost expect there should be some digital interface or layer that makes it more user friendly. So we support on that digital services, the digital connected services. And that means that they are going through two transformations. So they're having the business transformation in selling a new product, new services, and understanding what that is. And at the same time, from being an analog business where they have little data led more than maybe logistics data and so on, to all of a sudden create a relationship with a customer, getting their, an instant back and forth. And for a business that never had that, it's a big shift, both cultural and technical, and learning, and there's many things onto it.
Okay. And so your team then are engaged in actually designing and delivering digital services in terms of creating platforms and that type of thing, or are you involved in the strategy layer as well?
So we started to engage with Philip, with PMI, when they wanted to create a purpose and vision and strategy aligned with the product that they were working on. Based on that purpose, they wanted to create a 5-year vision of where are we going to be in 5 years to drive us towards the purpose. Then they wanted to have the strategy taking them 5 years. And then we were asked to build kind of the stepping stones with kind of a annual capabilities plan of where do we need to be each year. And then as the last layer of that was to create the first year's roadmap with concepts and implementation work that was going to be. That's how we started to work with them. From there, it's translated to be part of the rather big team then that is delivering on these. So kind of I have this end-to-end vision for the company as a whole. We need to have the capabilities to deliver whatever we advise on. Otherwise, why should anyone listen to us then?
How big is your team?
When I started out, I had the experience from the consultancy industry, like you do as well, and many others with me. I think there is a conflict of interest that I think everyone is aware about, but nobody talks about, which is the staffing of engagement that you're building. So on the one hand side, the client wants to have the right people on the right team to create the right product or outcome, right? And I think ideally that's what every consultancy will tell you that they do. But there is a factor of the bench. So the people that are currently not allocated to projects, the people who are not billed. And for any consultancy, having unbilled people on the bench is draining your cash flow. It's draining your results. It's the worst thing. You don't want to have especially senior people on the bench is killing you. The pressure is coming down to the salesperson again, pushed, sell this product because we have all these people here, Might not be what the client needs or want, but we need it. So that conflict of interest, I felt never served the clients. So my original idea was to create basically a flexible or hybrid organization to a vast extent use freelancers, which were, readily available. I still believe in the flexible organization. Yeah. I believe in having a large network of talented people, both individually and as organization, to build from. If you're McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte, or all of these, you can have experts in the smallest area because you have a vast organization to sustain that. For smaller operations, you still want to tap into that, but you can't afford to have these expensive resources on the payroll. Now, to your question, how many people are we? It's 7 on the engagement team. We have the board, which adds another 4. And then we're now working with a couple of advisors. So let's say that there is 10, 11, 12, around that number, people that are, having their main activity as an employee or support.
Okay. No, it's really interesting what you were saying around not having a bloated team for fear of the bench, etc. Because I had exactly the same takeaway from my time of working in consulting, which was when I was moving out to start working for myself, having been that kind of client lead that was engaging with the clients and seeing a request come from a client.
I gave you that request.
You
remember
did.
that?
Many
And I was quite forceful.
Many times, yes. I wouldn't say I have trauma around it, but close to. No, but it's the reality of those larger businesses. And, I now understanding a little bit more what it is to run a business, I can't imagine what it would be like having a team of people sat there, not being able to actually bill and just being a cost. Huge amount of pressure. And what I found when I was working with clients, something that you were just saying, which is that a client would come to me and say, "Oh, we need this type of project," and it would be a little bit outside of our usual wheelhouse. And you go back to the delivery team, like, "Do we have anyone that can do this?" Like, "Well, not really, but this person's a really quick learner, so we'll just put them on it because they're on the bench at the moment, and they'll figure it out." And I realized when I was starting to work for myself that that's not what I wanted to do, and that this vision that you had around that kind of network of freelancers or partners is exactly the stage that I'm at now, and it's actually ended up forcing me more into recruitment than actual delivery of services. For that exact reason, with the clients that I do work with, I've become somebody that can find them the specialist resource that can do X, Y, or Z. And I think it was born out of that not wanting to have kind of a bench of people there that I was shoehorning into different types of projects just because I needed to pay for them.
Yeah, the pressure is real. And if we felt it, we can be sure that others feel it. And I'm not saying that customers are unaware about these. There are those that are savvy, they accept it as part of doing business with large consultancies or consultancies in general. At the time, starting Liminal Discovery, I got the opportunity to start to work with Electrolux. That was actually my first client that we worked with. It was such a great first project to do because it spoke exactly to what my vision of this business was, about reimagining based on your purpose. So those engagement in the beginning, they were completely delivered by freelancers. So the model worked, and it stopped working when I needed to scale the business for more different type of opportunities and to generate some type of business growth, because you need to invest in your own business structures that you're building internally, whatever that is, knowledge sharing, reuse of content, or, constant whatever that is. So that's when I made the decision to open up in Portugal. It was actually a good opportunity. That's where we have our team in Portugal. It's between Algarve, Lisbon, and Oporto. I'm the only one besides now Rita part-time and my accountant that is here. Then we have a German guy sitting in Mallorca. So that's another location. And then we have Algarve, Oporto, and Lisboa. And then with the freelance network and people who are engaged full-time or part-time, we have Netherlands.
Okay, so kind of dotted all over the place. And as you say, I mean, digital doesn't have borders, right? Now, particularly post the pandemic, it's so easy to work remotely, and a lot of tech companies are remote first these days. And so even though you're based here, your company is set up in Portugal, you have some team members there, it doesn't mean that you can't have team members in Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, wherever else. As long as they can get on a call with a client and travel on the occasions that they need to, the two kind of requirements, right?
It is. I mean, there is the legal aspects. You need to pay taxes somewhere. And that means you need to file the salaries somewhere. I had this idea about that we were going to be a hybrid organization. We were going to have a place where we could meet. And then, if people wanted to work from home or somewhere else, that'd be fine. We never really got our own office space in that sense. And the only challenge that I see with that, and this is real, and when you're talking about hybrid, remote, or on-site work, there is a trade-off. And I think people who are, failing to admit the trade-off are not honest about it. You can say, I'm much more creative sitting at home. I'm much more effective sitting home. That's you as an individual.
Yeah.
That's great. Great for you. The question is it applicable for everyone? Is it the same for everyone? And I don't think it is. I actually think that for young people entering a career, starting their career, to not have an office space to go to is a failure for them. We are failing them as a generation, because you learn so much in the office just by observing how senior people are interacting with other senior people, just to observe people in meetings, just to hear how people are talking at lunch. These informal type of learning from others, they're not being given that the same way. And those type of values, when you reach a certain level of seniority, you're expected to have them. And if you don't have them, no one is going to teach you, because you are going to be deemed as not fit for purpose. And then the last part is creativity. And this, I actually do believe that everyone benefits from working collectively at the same place. The team creativity, yes, your creativity might be better, but if you want to have true creativity in a team, 1 hour meeting or a Teams meeting is not going to replace that. The physical space will do. So what we've done is we found a way where we create, every quarter, we bring everyone together in a place where we spend a couple of days being able to both work on a day-to-day things. So it's not like one brainstorming idea. The idea is that we should be able to have time to do our everyday work, but with a chance to also interact around that. And then we have time set off for either figuring out solutions to something we're struggling with, to help somebody on a problem, or whatever that might be. So that's a way to mitigate that. Having an organization where there's one person there, one person there, one person there, eventually it's going to cost you a lot to fly everybody in. unless you want to work 100% remotely, which is perfectly fine to do. But I believe you're leaving a lot of value on the table if you go only for remote work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was speaking on one of the other episodes of this podcast with managing director of a tech company. He lives here in Barcelona. He has a few team members here, but he also has a lot of his team are in the UK and their clients are in the UK, and they're a remote first company. And we were talking about kind of the challenges of that, and yeah, there's pros and cons. But yes, getting people together a few times a year, he said, is absolutely critical. And I think I saw on LinkedIn, I remember when we worked together, you were a big fan of those kind of away days somewhere in Catalonia, like a big Masia. And I think I saw with Liminal Discovery, you did something similar. Yeah, what's your favorite area to do that in Catalonia?
For me, anywhere in Catalonia, the part that I liked with Catalonia, it started as an experiment. I wasn't sure where it was going to be. And after that, I kept it sacred when we worked together, and I brought it with me into this. The fact of having a large country house like a Masia, which is isolated from the city, where you have your space to sleep and so on. But when you're up, you eat together, you prepare the food together, you work together. You know, in the evening, you have a few beers or wine or some sodas, whatnot, in front of a fire maybe, and you share life stories or you play games, whatever. That one is so I don't have a favorite space. The Masias in Catalonia offers a great place to do them, though, because it offers you this kind of seclusion from the rest of the world, and you have a space where you can be, you know, with a team a few days, allowing you to connect more profoundly. Two evenings by the fireplace after dinner, that it just creates a different bond.
No, I have fond memories of the ones that we did together, and yeah, I think you're right. Like that kind of Masia, which, you know, for anyone that doesn't know, is like a big country house out in the countryside here in Catalonia, is the perfect space because you have like this big house where you're all together. You had some breakout rooms where you could do, you know, some focus sessions on, you know, what's coming up this year or those types of things, and then really nice activities. Like I remember we used to do the calcetada, which is like the kind of traditional barbecue here in Catalonia in the springtime with the long onions, the calçots, and yeah, those types of team building activities were really great. And I think that there's a lot of those types of beautiful old houses here in Catalonia.
The value is really to bring people professionally to build those strong bonds, and I think they're extremely more important for remote businesses.
Agreed. Okay, and so looking ahead then for Liminal Discovery. So, I mean, you've mentioned two landmark clients as your first two clients. You worked with Electrolux, you know, household brand for white good electronics, and Philip Morris, as you said, the parent company of the largest cigarette brand in the world. I mean, those are two huge first clients for a small business. Is the intention to continue trying to sort of whale hunt, let's say, or are you looking at different types of opportunities for the next stage of Liminal Discovery?
So we've had a few other clients as well. So, but yeah, these are the two significant enterprises. One, if you have a company that has a global business with a global impact, I would like to work with them. So I want to continue to work with the large enterprises, no question about it. But that's driven from a business impact that we can have through them. We can multiply the impact from our work by their impact and so on. But if I look at an underserved segment, I'm actually starting to look more to the mid-level enterprise segment in Europe, especially within certain domains like manufacturing, retail, logistics, and so forth. You know, the non-digital first industries. There is no the unique thing with the shift, and it's AI that is driving this now, is that this will hit indiscriminately almost across all jobs, all levels of businesses, all businesses. It doesn't discriminate. You know, this is going to hit across management. It's going to hit across, you know, traditional office and knowledge workers. It's going to hit across production planning. It's going to hit basically everywhere, and it's going to do it roughly at the same time. But that means that there is no industry, there is no practice, there is no nothing that is going to be isolated from this, which means that mid-level enterprise segment is going to stand in front of the same challenges that the large enterprises and the small players are doing, and they're squeezed in the middle. They don't have, the huge resources maybe of the largest ones. They don't have the nimbleness of the small one. They will need help. They will need the support. And this is where I think that, with our purpose and our values, especially in this, when we're very human centered, which is even more important with AI. You can't disconnect what you're doing with AI from the humans in the organization. It just does not work. And it's been proven, but you can't do that. You need to go human first. It needs to be that. That's the segment I think we're going to hopefully start to see more success in.
Okay, so AI is gonna form a big part of the next year or so of Liminal.
I see it as our opportunity. Yes, I think it's going to be a big part of what we can offer. It's going to be a big part about what's demanded out there. But what keeps me awake is actually, what does it mean for us? Because running a consultancy today in the age of AI is going to be very different from what it was. If you're working in a knowledge and experience industry, that's ripe for transformation. So right now, the entire digital consultancy or agency world, if I were to say what industry will change, our industry is going to change.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How do we capture value? How do we offer value? That's what I need to figure out together with my team. What do we do? Because if we think that we're going to keep on doing what we're doing 2 years from now, I don't think we're going to be relevant.
Yeah, I think it's something I've been thinking a lot about as well, with regards to, right now the consulting model is day rates, right? You have a project that more or less takes, most projects will take at least 3 months, let's say, to get to anything meaningful. So you've got 3 to 4 months of sort of runway of somebody billing at X amount per day. And you're like, okay, I need 3 projects a year to keep that person fully engaged. Great. What happens when suddenly you can deliver that in 3 weeks? And then suddenly you need 10, 15 projects a year to keep somebody engaged on a day rate. And that I think is going to be a real shift for the entire consulting industry, where clients will understand, hey, I know that with these platforms you can produce something like this in 2 weeks. I've done it myself, or I saw a colleague do it. And I think it's going to be a very large challenge for consulting businesses like ourselves to move to that more output billing model as opposed to time billing model.
Yes, for sure. So when we're getting into the day of AI for us as a business, I think what you say, outcome based, the value that you create for that. But I think also part of what that you can do is in transformation, create clarity and call out where organizations and their tech structure no longer applies with their values. And I think that's a different price tag on these type of things.
Yeah. I think it's going to be very interesting few years for everybody. But yeah, I mean, I think exciting to hear how you're thinking about it and the types of opportunities that you're looking to go after, based on what you were saying earlier about that sort of mid-sized business that will be looking at these challenges and trying to figure out how they can approach them. In terms of if someone wants to follow along your journey and learn more about Liminal Discovery, where's the best place for them to do that?
Probably on our website and on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to engage with anyone who like to talk. I'm like I said, I like to spend as much time as possible to talk to people where I can learn from them. And even if I don't learn, I learn from the questions they ask.
Well, I'll post links to both of those along with this recording.
Thank you, Kris.
And one thing I like to do on this podcast as well is to give a hidden gem recommendation here in Barcelona. Do you have anywhere that's your favorite spot that you love to go?
Yes, I have many favorite spots. I mean, this is the city of hidden gems, so to speak. And I can't tell you my most sacred hidden gem because it's not hidden anymore, is it? No, but I'll give you one, which is I like oysters, and just around the corner from here, called Gautier. It's a oyster slash delicacy restaurant. It's a small corner here in Sarria Square, which is absolutely fabulous to sit outside in a summer night. It's far from the touristic areas, and it's just one of these squares that you fall in love with when you get there, and especially this restaurant with the oysters and the small dishes, and yeah. So
Sounds amazing.
that would
Well,
be
I'll
my
definitely get the link for that from you. That sounds lovely. In closing, it's been a great conversation, Michael. We've talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would have liked to have discussed today?
There are three things I would like for people to bring with them: understanding purpose, understanding organizational purpose and business purpose. That is something that in the age of AI, and I'm talking about defining what is not what we build, not what we produce, not what we sell, but why does this business and organization exist, and why do people come here to work? I would urge anyone in any business, small, big, or large, start to understand that, because not just don't do the fancy work with it, do a real searching work about it, because that's going to decide if you're successful in the day of AI. Second is understand the values that you have and want to have in the business, because that's going to be equally important if you're going to build AI-enabled organizations. If you have no clue about the values that you are going to put in, or that comes with whatever you put in there, you can get very, very wrong. So that's the second part. And that goes into the culture and this human first culture. And I say human first because in the age of AI, it can be so easily that you talk about replacing humans. And humans will be replaced. Saying anything else will be a lie. Jobs will be lost. There will be other jobs created, but we will, in a very short lifespan, see a lot of jobs being, changed, disappear, transformed. People can argue with it, but it's already happening. But an organization without human values and without focusing on that the business is there to serve humanity, you're kind of out of business already there. So I would say purpose, values, and culture, and to get those right. That's what I would like people to take with them. Do that and the rest will follow.
Very well said and very well summarized. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today and for doing it in person. I mean, this has been a real trial and error scenario, but I think we've managed to have a really great conversation, and it's been great to do it in person. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kris. It was a true pleasure.
I'm really pleased. And yeah, if you're listening and would like to learn more about Michael and what he's doing, you can obviously check out the links that I'll be sharing along with these show notes. Thank you so much for joining as always. Please share this with anybody that you think might find it interesting, and be sure to join me next time for my next conversation with somebody that's doing something interesting here in Barcelona. Michael, thank you.
Thanks, Kris.